Daryl, good to see you as always. And thanks for taking a bit of time to come on. So let's start this kind of conversation. Let me ask you. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who would say that building a business is like riding a roller coaster. Roller coaster, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Why do you get up every morning and continue to ride the roller coaster? Let's start with that. What is it that motivates you? What is it that gets you out of bed every day?
You know, I it's very interesting because it's been consistent and changed over time. Parts of it are consistent, parts of it
Right.
have changed. You know, the when we started out with doing Connection Point, uh, was just looking to do an internet business, trying to do something that was new and emerging in the world and take advantage of the trends that were starting to happen in social media and create a business on that.
Mhm.
And then along the way, started to notice that the work that we were doing had a lot of impact. And the results that we were creating were really motivating,
Right.
to feel like that we were making a difference in a charitable space or a philanthropic space or a creative space. And so over time, it started to really morph into more of a mission as opposed to just a business.
Right.
And in doing that, I think it changed in terms of, one, looking for create prosperity for me and my team. And then the other is looking at creating impact in the world. And ideally, we're doing them both at the same time.
Sure.
So,
And
when the company cares about what it's doing, it's a much more enjoyable experience for the people who are working for it.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And when did you realize? Because I know you've been at this a little while now. I mean, when did you realize that you had a global business on your hands? I mean, you started out just wanting to create an online business. I mean, when did you realize I've got something that I could take global here? I mean, just tell us about that moment.
It was a very interesting epiphany because when we got started creating our first version of our fundraiser product, it was focused a lot on scratching the itch that I'd had, which is about trying to raise money for my son's lacrosse team. And we were using Facebook and social media to help get the message out and
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
be able to find an audience in that way. And we had to kind of rebuild the whole thing because Facebook changed all the algorithm and the APIs that we were using as they tried to get control over the content that was going into their newsfeed. Because there was gaming companies at the time that were really abusing it. And so when we relaunched, we added a partnership with PayPal. And the
Right.
partnership with PayPal meant that when we turned the system on, we instantly had international customers. I mean, we're a Canadian-based company. Our first customer literally was signed up from America. And
Right.
then I think it was hours later, we had our first customer from Canada, and hours later, our first customer from the UK, more to do with time zones than anything else.
Okay.
So it became, I mean, it was designed from the beginning to be global company in that we knew that this was likely, we didn't want to restrict it to just our domestic market. So it wasn't, I guess, the surprise when it actually happened, as opposed to just dreaming about it happening. To
Yeah.
have the first customers coming in and going, wow, they're not from here. This is cool.
Yeah. And when you realized that you were going to be able to turn it into a global business, I mean, how did you approach that? Because I mean, some people would say that's quite a daunting prospect, for a small team to build a global business. I mean, how did you approach that process of actually, turning it into a global player in the way that you have? I mean, give us a sense of that.
Yeah, there's lots of little things that come from it. One of them is to try not to look at the business from your local lens. I mean, really, we had to start adopting. We're always supposed to do this, but it's sometimes harder because we can work on our assumptions and our basic ways of acting because they're natural to us for what we do in our country. But when we're starting to think about it from a global point of view, we have to look at it from how those customers really view it. How do they communicate? How do we communicate with them? What's important to them in that? And so we had to start from right away from that kind of new mindset about thinking about it from their perspective. And, fortunately, in the very early days of this, the leveling of the playing field that something like Facebook gave us, in that uh, its mechanism of operating was very similar across all countries.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to do the cultural adjustments in the same way. And at the time, we didn't have to worry about regulatory. Basically, it was the wild west of what's going on. We're going to it as an ethical business, and so how do we operate in that? And we didn't have to worry about local compliance issues or local um, in the same way. There were some capabilities there that we had to add, but most of it was not about having to tailor ourselves to that individual market. And that was a great advantage in trying to grow it quickly. Now, as the industry's matured, those regulatory issues are starting to come up, and we're actually starting to withdraw our footprint from some areas of the world because it's just too hard to have that level of regulatory compliance and do it properly with the size of the team that we have.
Yeah.
And we can, I mean, it was great to say that we operate in 100 countries and we have donors in 100 countries. We'll still have donors in 100 countries, but we're not going to have campaigns running in probably more than 30 or 40,
Right.
just because of the way we can manage that.
Sure. But that's still a substantial number of jurisdictions to be dealing with.
It is. And it's daunting at times to
Yeah.
think that, the biggest worry in that is, are we missing something? Are
Yeah.
we missing something that we should be doing that's a local convention, a local requirement, a local law, a local, filing, paperwork that's needed, anything like that? It's hard to know all those things at the size we are.
Keep track of them. And are there a lot of those things? I mean, are there, if you're in 30, 40 jurisdictions, I mean, are there a lot of things that you need to keep track of?
There
Keep
are
track of?
some, I'll give you an example. Like, for example, we work with a lot of charitable organizations. And the way tax receipting is done in the different jurisdictions is substantially different.
Yeah.
And UK has gift aid and the way that the contribution is topped up for the charity
Yeah.
if the donor agrees that they would like it to happen. Canada and the US and others are about issuing a tax receipt for the donation that's claimed as part of their tax return. But the rules around the receipts, the formats of the receipts are different from most of those countries. So there are yeah, I'd say, yeah, they can be simple like that.
Mm.
Some people would think of that as a little more complex, but to me, that's a simple thing. The difference now is that the regulators are coming in and setting rules local to the countries
Yeah.
that are harder to manage.
Yeah. And as you're saying, they force you to pull back,
Hmm.
which is unfortunate, really, isn't it?
Well, and it really kind of points out the problems of how do we be competitive globally? How can, as a small business, can we be competitive globally now that the internet brings the entire globe to our doorstep?
Yeah.
Or I think the more appropriate is we can reach out through the internet to their doorstep.
Yeah.
How do we do that properly? And there's all sorts of conflict of laws, issues back and forth between the various jurisdictions, particularly things like personal privacy. European rules are much stronger than North American rules,
Mm.
except within patchwork of North America, where that have stronger rules as well, but they have weird angles to them. So trying to understand what happens when even within one jurisdiction, I know this is a little deep, but we have a privacy rule around what do we need to do with donors' data, and we're supposed to delete it. And we have a data retention rule from within the same jurisdiction that we have to keep the data. So the donor says, I want to delete it, and we are fined if we don't delete it. And the financial regulators say, you've got to keep it, or you're fined if you don't keep it.
Mm.
Conflict of laws, guys, pick one. Like, we'll do
Yeah.
which one you
Yeah.
want, but you can't both argue. You work it out so that we don't have to try and figure out what we're going to do and make sure that we're legally compliant.
Yeah. I mean, building a business is difficult enough without that kind of nonsense, isn't it?
It's
And,
nonsense.
I mean, you mentioned the competitiveness. I mean, how do you see that issue in terms of, obviously businesses have got to stay competitive. I mean, how do you approach that if, given that you're in all these different jurisdictions? I mean, it may be less now than perhaps before, but, you know, trying to stay competitive in 30 different jurisdictions, again, there's an awful lot there. I mean, how have you approached that? How have you handled that?
Uh, it's funny because I don't think of it as competing within the jurisdiction. I feel like we only compete on the global level against other global competitors. There's
Right.
That may not be accurate, but it feels more like that.
Sure.
If we go into a country and are operating in the country, there can be a strong local incumbent. And we still think of them as competing from our global point of view. We don't try and match them, tit for tat or aspect for or messaging within the country as much. We just simply can't. So I guess the technique is um, while we were starting the company, my daughter wrote something to me. She was 10 or 12 or something like that. And she was watching me one day and she said, I think what you should do is play so big you know how to win.
Right.
And that may seem silly, but in some ways, if we step back far enough, it becomes homogeneous enough
Mm.
that we can actually become competitive in that. And I know it may seem silly, but it's actually been a guiding thing for it. Is
Yeah.
how do we play so big we know we can win?
Yeah. And just give us an example. I mean, it's a lovely idea. I mean, give us an example of how that might work, for example. I mean, obviously, you don't give away anything commercially sensitive, but give us an idea of how you would do that.
Well, just I think part of it comes from confidence building of saying we have, you know, owning up to that our technology might be one of the best in the world.
Right.
Yeah, that's an arrogant thought. And it's a pretty darn big planet, and there's a lot of people doing really amazing things. And yet we can look at it and go, there's proof that parts of this is true.
Mm.
It's only parts of it because you can't be perfect at everything in there. But owning that or acknowledging that or not apologizing for that
Yeah.
is part of that mindset that comes with, play so big, you can win. To have the arrogance to say that we can be that and then shoot for it. And then, they say shoot for the moon and at least you'll achieve orbit. I mean, that's kind of the approach there.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean that mindset thing's really important, I think. I mean, you mentioned competitors. I mean, the other question in my mind is, if you're in, let's say, 30 jurisdictions, I know you've been in a lot more, but I mean, how on earth do you keep track of all the competitors? I mean, there must be loads of them.
Well, for a little boom period, there were thousands of crowdfunding companies.
Yeah.
Everyone, we used to joke that every CEO who was left the startup, left the high tech business, decided to start a philanthropic crowdfunding company as their penance for whatever they'd done in the rest of
Yeah.
their life. And so they were trying to do that. And then, natural market forces whittled it down substantially. And in recent years, private equity and VC mergers and acquisitions have whittled it down substantially.
Right.
So it, um, but I think the kind of the simplest form of that is that we don't worry about competing with all of them. What we worry about is doing the best thing that we can do.
Okay.
And that starts with a focus on the customer. Are we doing what they need us to do for them?
Yeah.
And the competition falls away because if we focus on that at a competitive pricing model and service model, then our competition is kind of ourselves. Can
Mm.
we do it better than anybody else and keep doing that and align ourselves with their needs, the best possible version of ourselves, and that works for competition.
Yeah, and I mean it's an interesting issue that. I mean, I'm thinking about pricing. I mean, if you were, if you're in, let's say, in the US and you're in, say, I don't know, a country in Africa or something. I mean, would you have a very different pricing model, and how do you manage that with the competition? I mean, because the pricing thing can, I mean, your product could be competitive in terms of the features and the
Mhm.
benefits of it, but they may not be competitive pricing wise in some markets, I suppose is the thing that's in my mind. I mean, how do you manage stuff like that?
Well, part of it is the design of our business model right from the get-go. And so just to maybe help everyone understand a little bit better, we give away what we do for free and make money on it. And so that's a model that sometimes drives people a little nuts. But we work really on the idea of tipping or fee recovery, where we charge a fee and ask for the fee to be recovered. So we have one price all over the world in the way
Oh,
we do it.
right.
There's no differences in the individual markets. That really, really, really helps
Sure.
because I don't have to think about any sort of regional arbitrage or anything like that going on. And um, the basis of the model is then it scales our price, the value we deliver to our customers scales based on how successful they are with our product. The more successful they are, the more money we make. We don't have to try and charge them for premium features. We don't have to charge them
Okay.
for additional seat licenses or anything like that in the product. It's just use as much of it as you can. Please use all of it.
Mhm.
And we will invest in customers who use it, put our staff time in for free to help them run their campaign because it helps make us more money. Now we can't do it for every customer, every project out there. They have to have some potential. But we evaluate their potential and then we work alongside them to help get a better
Okay.
result. That's how we optimize our revenue. It's not about changing our price, it's about changing our success.
Okay.
And really
And
it
how do
starts
you, I
with
mean,
changing their success.
that's a really interesting business model. I mean, how did you come up with that? Did you discover that by accident or was that a planned thing? I mean, how did you figure that out?
It was a combination. We were of the when we got started, we saw that the fees in fundraising were one of the biggest barriers to
Okay.
customers' satisfaction. Nonprofits want things to be free. That's just how they operate. So that driving factor in the way they do stuff really helped us ask the questions, how can we make this free?
Mm.
How could we go about doing it? And um, I had a little saying for a while that in the race to lower prices, the it price dropping is natural. Some businesses like Walmart force you if you haven't brought it down 10% or whatever it is every
Yeah.
year, they won't work with you. So they drive the price down. But so in the race to zero in terms of your pricing, because somebody will keep cutting it until it's zero. The only way to win is to get there first and find somebody else who's willing to pay the price.
Okay.
So that's what happened in our case is we dropped it, we stopped charging the organization and started taking voluntary payments from the donors to pay our because they were happier with us than the cause was. They went, oh, sure, I'll give you the price of a cup of coffee to make this contribution. I love the work these guys are doing, and thank you for helping them. And the
Uh,
causes, sometimes like, well, you got $5 out of that. That was my money. You should like it's funny approach to scarcity that happens on one side of the market and the generosity that happens on the other side.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we leaned into the generosity.
Yeah. A brave move, mind. But successful by the sounds of things. And I mean, the other thing that is interesting about, given that you're in an awful lot of jurisdictions, I mean, I know, I mean, all businesses have a limit to their resources, but you have a relatively small team to manage that global
Very small,
footprint.
yeah.
I mean, so one of the issues then is how do you help your team perform at an optimal level all the time? I mean, how do you do that? And how do you, I mean, running the things day to day is great, but then often I mean, your business must have been like some of mine where things just go wrong and you've got to deal with it. But if you haven't got a lot of people, you can't just throw resource at it. I mean, how do you manage those sorts of things in terms of your team?
Oh, that's a kind of a so many different ways to answer that question. And just for everyone to understand, when we talk about small team, we're talking about 12 people.
Mm,
So um, a lot of it is, I think it starts with, how do I get the most out of someone is to start by saying that's my goal.
mm,
So it's not about giving, being on them about how much they're delivering. It's kind of the opposite. How do we help them be the most effective version and the best version of themselves in what we do? And when we frame the work that we're doing with them in that light, then it tends to elevate them naturally
yeah.
and they are accomplishing more. And it also means that we get to focus more on doing the right thing as opposed to doing the thing right. So that's a glib phrase for it. But a lot of times we focus on efficiency instead of effectiveness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of
Okay.
our best phrases is the fastest way to do something is not to have to do it at all. So how do we not have to do this?
Yeah.
Either by designing the software to make sure that we never have to do it again. I'm incredibly lazy. And now people go,
I'm not
"What
sure
do
I
you
believe
work
that,
so
Daryl.
hard?" But I am. And one of the reasons for it is that I never like doing the same thing twice.
Right.
It really bothers me to do the same thing
Right.
twice. I have tremendous admiration for people who can do exactly the same thing over and over, and they refine that down to, perfection.
Mm.
I just don't understand that. My brain rebels on that. So I want to focus on not having to do stuff, but having it happen. And that is part of the way we get more out of the team.
Mm.
And another key component of that, I think, is trust.
Right.
That when I'm working with the team, it's really important for me to trust them. I can't be second guessing. We have to really give them the ability to do stuff. And so trust works to build trust, the simplest way to build it is to give it away.
Mm.
So if I give you my trust, it's not blind. It's not saying, oh, I trust you implicitly. Part of the thing with trust comes with respect, which is I trust you to do this. How can I help make sure you have the resources you need to make it happen?
Mm.
What do you need from me to make this happen?
Yeah.
And not, kindly blindly delegating it and hope everything goes well. I'm not on their shoulders at all. It's more, how can I help? I probably am irritating on how when I ask how often, how can I help? But that's the place where maybe I overcorrect a little bit.
Right.
But yeah, so kind of in building the team, we had to build the trust with them and with each other. Are you a Ted Lasso fan?
I've heard of him. I don't know him, but
Well, as the Apple TV show that was on, it was about an American football, regular
okay.
football
The
coach,
coach.
coaching a
Yeah.
British Premier Soccer League. And at one point, at the end of the kind of the third season, there was the epiphany that what they had been doing was not an overnight change, but that they spent years building the group to the point where they trusted each other
Mm.
and that they wanted the most for each other in what they did. And as a result, they got spectacular result.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the coaching essence of that. Maybe that comes from my coaching side when I was coaching boys sports. How do we help them be the biggest? That was a line in the show. How do you help we just help these boys be the biggest and best version of themselves on and off the field?
Mm.
That's the goal. The game winning, the business success is a side effect
Yeah.
of doing that.
Well, one of the things that must happen a lot, though, I mean, I guess this happens everywhere, is that things go wrong. People have
Mhm.
fails of one type or another. I mean, what's your take on? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion recently about, creating spaces where people feel able to fail, and
Mhm.
I mean, what's your take on that with such a small team dealing with such a wide range of issues and wide range of problems? What's your take on the failure piece? I mean, how do you think about that issue?
Um, First off, if you're not having the occasional failure in your team, it means you're not actually pushing
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
So it's an indicator. If you're hitting a rocking chair, you're, in my book, you're probably in hitting a space where you're preparing for your own demise
mm,
because the world is changing really quickly.
yeah,
And we need to be adjusting to it all the time. And some of those adjustments are done with nowhere near enough information to decide. So we have to be able to launch ourselves into the void and try stuff
mm,
and not have anybody harmed by doing that. If it and it's all based on intention. If the intention is right,
mm,
then they can make lots of mistakes. If the intention is wrong, they only get one or two
yeah,
because that's the we're not trying to let someone not do their optimal stuff because they don't care anymore. What we want them to do is give it a try and have the ability to take that risk. And a lot of times in those risk-taking bits, I know this is wandering a bit on you, but it's about communication.
mm,
If someone takes a risk and doesn't kind of communicate that we're going to do this, then it's harder because the rest of the organization can't help, but also can't respond if something's going wrong and
mm,
maybe not gone wrong yet. So the that's there's lots of thoughts to unpack in there, but um, you know, we we're Canadian. We say sorry a whole lot. Um, I try not to have it so that everybody has to feel like they have to say they're sorry. You know, we goofed that up. Let's go fix it.
Mm.
Is much better than, oh, I'm sorry we did that.
Yeah,
Sorry's got some guilt to it. Don't do that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's mistakes are inevitable, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
they're in. I mean, I think there are only two types of people in the world. There are people that make mistakes and people that pretend they don't.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
you know, but we all make mistakes all the time. I mean, that's been, you know, the older I get, the more I realise that that's the case, really. Yeah,
It was a fun piece because um, for a while we were going through a period and we summarized it as that we're trying to keep it down to 5 major mistakes a day.
right.
And it like that wasn't just that was real. We were we were breaking stuff. We were having troubles. We were mispositioning things. We were misunderstanding things. We were ignoring data that we shouldn't have been ignoring.
Mm.
These were major mistakes that we were making along the way. And, it feels that we're down to ma fewer major mistakes, but we still make major mistakes all the time.
Yeah,
And it's just about how do you respond to them.
yeah,
And the quickest way is to let it roll off your back and just keep going.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, one of the other interesting things about having a small team is, and if you just take the 30 jurisdictions that you're, thinking about, I mean, how do you, I mean, well, first of all, how do you build partnerships across them? I mean, you talked a lot earlier on
Mhm.
about trust. I mean, trust, it seems to me, is at the heart of any partnerships that you develop. And obviously you work with quite a lot of partners. I mean, how do you do that? And then how do you manage those partnerships? I think, if I had 30 partnerships to manage, I'd be running around like a headless chicken. There's a lot there to do. I mean,
Mhm.
how do you approach those sorts of issues? And also in lots of different jurisdictions, with people that do things in different ways and different cultures and so on. I mean, how do you manage that?
Um, there's, yeah, a lot of different things. Let me tell you a story about one partnership. And I think it's a really good model for someone to look at in their business because they're going, how can we ever have a partnership with so and so as a business? So we are at this point a 4-person company, and we're starting to 4.5, and we're starting to build up to go forward. And one of the key things we needed was a payment processing model for what we did.
Right.
So we ended up working with PayPal on and got access to some of their brand new leading edge technology that they were just putting out for marketplace payments, where we can move as a small player, we could facilitate moving a payment from a donor to a cause. And we helped them develop that. And then years later, people said, how did you end up working so closely as a
Mm.
tiny company with this big partner to be a national launch partner for this?
Mm.
And my answer to it was that if we think about trying to have a relationship with PayPal, it's very, very hard. But what we did have was great relationships with people within PayPal.
Mm.
And we started with that. And if you want a relationship with a bigger company like that, it's the thing to ask is what's the win in it for the person in the company,
Mm.
not the company?
Yeah.
And it may seem obvious when you say it, but so many times we're going, I need to present to why this is a really big business deal for
Yeah.
PayPal.
Yeah.
And it's not. But what it was is we were solving a problem for the product manager that they needed test data.
Yeah.
And because we're willing to go in there and help make sure that Srinivas was successful with it, then we got access to stuff that we never would have had.
Yeah.
And we punched way above our weight on the world stage. We did some of the same with Facebook. We were one of the launch partners for the timeline feature with Facebook, one of
Mm.
the 30 lifestyle companies that they called that were part of that. That was because we were helping relationships we've been able to make with some people that worked at Facebook, and we were helping them with their career path and their KPIs. And doing that, we got access to all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
because they have the levers they can pull.
Yeah. I mean, in effect, you create an advocate within the organization, don't you? Somebody that wants to work with you because you help them out.
Well, and we talk a lot about what we do as collaborative commerce, and we tackle. I think that that's probably one of our tenets is that we go at everything as a collaboration.
And
So it's
when you use that phrase, sorry to interrupt you, when you use that phrase collaborative commerce, I mean,
Mhm.
um, tell me what that means to you. I mean, I've heard other people talk about that, and I think the way they might use it is different to the way you use it. I mean, give us a sense of what you mean when you say that, because I think, having spoken to you on quite a few occasions on the past, I think that kind of reflects a philosophy that's underlying how you do things. I mean, give us a sense of what you mean by collaborative commerce, and why is it
Yeah.
important?
So to us, we kind of define it as causes and corporations working together with consumers to increase business value and social impact. So that's the mission statement of collaborative commerce. For people practically, it's that um, it's when people can work together to solve a funding problem. So, for example, we have a product line called CocoPay, and CocoPay is about using crowdfunding techniques and turning it into crowd financing, where someone who has a need, like say for an advanced prosthetic, can get help from friends and family to purchase that device by paying it directly into the business. So the business offers this tool as part of their financing suite, and they let people work together to buy something.
Okay.
That's an example of a collaborative commerce thing. The key parts of that are that, we have to have some faith that there's some generosity in the world, that people are
Yeah.
willing to give more, to do more, to help more. And that really is about, it's not just a Pollyanna thing. It's actually very based in science, in that the idea is that when we are doing these things, we feel better about ourselves. We're getting a win in doing this.
Yeah.
And so, how do we help amplify that win and make sure that it's well communicated so that people are willing to do it again? If we give something, we typically feel very good about it. If we can remind you how good you felt, you're willing to give again a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
basic marketing stuff. So, but I think that goes into things like our partnership. We're not there to extract maximum value out of our customer.
Yeah.
We're there to help them achieve maximum value with our software and benefit because of it. So we collaborate in their result. I'm not worried about trying to make sure that they keep a seat license with me and that I hide it away that they're paying for it so that they don't cancel it.
Mm.
We go in there boldly and say, how do we help you raise more money?
Yeah.
And that's how we get paid more. So it starts with things like that around the collaboration. And the story about the PayPal partnership is it's a collaboration. I'm not there to try and take from PayPal. I'm there
Okay.
to try and give to PayPal. And in giving to PayPal, I get way more back.
Yeah.
I think that's a philosophy of life.
Yeah. And how did that come about? I mean, how did you? I get the philosophy. I mean, there's been a lot written about that. I mean, how did you? Where did the idea come from to convert that into a business operation? I mean, because it's a jump from a kind of a thought experiment to actually the way you've implemented that. I mean, just give us a sense of how you made that jump.
Um, I think most businesses resemble their founders in some way.
Right.
And so I didn't have to think about doing this. It's just the way we did it, right?
Okay.
There was no mental jump. It starts from the approach all the way along. And I I think that my personal journey to kind of get to the point of where win-win-win or theory Z or whatever the different things that you might call it. Um, I did some courses and learning about myself and trying to figure out how to be kind of more effective at what I did. And this is one theme that kept coming through is that I cannot win unless I help you win. And that's it's I think my level of ownership of that is probably higher than most people's. That might be one of the
Yeah.
reasons I built it this way, is I really truly believe that in the end I can't I only get short-term results if I try and abuse you in a relationship to maximize my value over yours.
Yeah.
I'm generous enough, I hope I'm generous enough to feel that if I maximize your value, I'm going to be fine. Sometimes that doesn't work out.
Mm.
And so yeah, it's a play that you go over spread over a bunch of people, it works.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
really does. So I don't know. I I think underlying that is kind of a philosophy to optimize for the long-term result, not optimize for the short.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I get that.
And in when we're optimizing for that long-term result, as long as we have to make sure that we're not, kind of failing along the way because we ran out of cash or we ran
Yeah.
out of team or ran out of resources in some way. We can't ignore the present. That's not it. And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, get it wrong is that they shoot for the big picture and forget how to build the next step path forward in their
Yeah.
path and
Yeah.
make sure that there's not a hole in their path that they fall into along the way.
Yeah. It's that thing about staying focused on the future, but dealing with today.
Dealing
And
with today.
you have to do both of those things, don't you? You can't, it's not an either or, really. You've got to do both if you're going to make progress.
But, in our communication with our team, that's a lot of the communication we'll have is what is the long-term result I mean, it's a question we ask all the time. What is the long-term result we want here? Okay, what are the risks and the steps to getting there?
And in terms of you as an individual, I mean, how do you, I mean, I think running a global business is quite a tough gig,
Mhm.
right? Because there's nowhere to hide. You can't delegate loads of stuff to other people to get things done. You've got to make sure it gets done. You've either got to do it or you've got to work with somebody to get it done. I mean, how do you optimize, if that's the right word, your own performance and effectiveness? I mean, do you feel you've changed? I know you've been at this for quite a while. I mean, do you feel you've changed and developed as a leader over that period? I mean, how do you keep on top of your own kind of performance and so on?
I think it's one of the things that I do the less consciously than I probably wish I did.
Right.
Um, I think I'm a little bit more reactive on that than I ideally would be. And the reason I say that, unfortunately for me, the reactive side hits my foundational instincts and my, kind of guiding principles, and it tends to survive pretty well,
Mm.
which is so I think the fact that I've got those parts that are strong in who I am already really helps make sure that I don't stumble badly along the way.
Yeah.
But I part of it is just self-awareness. I think very important that we
Yeah.
as leaders really, really know who we are. And the more we know who we are and how that person is okay. Like it's not, and you could sometimes say know who we are and who we really want to be.
Mm.
And the idea of congruence is moving who we really are and the way who we want to be and the way we show ourselves to the world. It's a Venn diagram where it's perfect when they overlap completely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that implies, and one of the key lessons I had to learn along the way was the vulnerability that comes out of that.
Yeah.
When I will tell you who I am really along the way and not worry about that. Like not worry that you'll use it against me or harm me with it or whatever. Again, it's a trust factor.
Yeah.
I give away a lot of trust. I'll tell people stuff about me that some would hold back. They won't say it.
Yeah.
And it's because frankly, I'll probably tell you how to hurt me. I'll tell you my vulnerabilities in a lot of
Mm.
cases
Mm.
because I trust that by doing that, I have a better chance of getting success with you than trying to protect or hide those things. That's a
Yeah.
hidden agenda.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally get that, and I completely follow the logic of that. I mean, the thing that was going through my mind is that it's easier to say than do. I mean,
Mm,
one of the things I've realised is that as I get older, when I look back on my life, I can see that there are consistently things that I've done well, and there are consistently things that I've got wrong. And but that comes, you have the benefit of hindsight to realise that. I mean, when I was 25 years old or whatever it was, I didn't necessarily know that I was good at those things and not so good at those things. I mean, part of this is you learn it along the way, don't you? And which is
mhm,
it's quite a difficult thing to achieve, that clarity around what your strengths and weaknesses are, and where you should be playing the game, if you like, and where you shouldn't be playing the game. I mean, it always strikes me as quite a tough thing for leaders to get a fix on that issue. I don't know how you feel about that, but
No, you're right. And there's a place where, in order to be a good leader, you really need to know how to be a good follower.
yeah.
That's a key point. So I used to joke that I started a company because I was unemployable. I felt like I was a really
You
horrible
and me
employee.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but what I realized in my leadership journey was that I can't I can't be a great leader until I really started understanding how to be a good follower and so I put myself in some situations where I had to follow again.
Mm.
You know, whether it was board work or other work I did along the way, that was places where I learned about myself, and that really helped. Um, so I think that self-awareness is like taking a look at who you are and looking at situations and going, you know, what did I like about what I did?
Yeah,
What did I not like about what I did? And the first question is as important as the second one,
yeah,
because you need to build up your confidence more than anybody else, because that imposter syndrome stuff is absolutely, you know, punishing
yeah,
on what goes on to your performance.
yeah,
And that's an area that I've had some places where I really kind of felt failing along the way.
yeah,
I was supposed to go do a pitch competition, and I love speaking. I don't know if you noticed. I love talking, and so to go do the pitch, I ended up in a hallway with almost a full panic attack going on. And I had to go look myself in the mirror and go, what's going on here? Like, you can handle this. These are
yeah,
things you love. What have you got? And it was performance anxiety showing up. I felt I was such an imposter at this one conference that I was
yeah,
speaking at. And it was destroying me.
yeah. The other thing that I think is interesting about being the CEO, I mean, I call it, people think about it as the chief executive officer. I think in small businesses, it's the chief everything officer. I mean, one of the things about that, though, is that my experience was that the things that land on your desk are the kind of messy things that nobody else wants to sort out or nobody else can sort out, you know.
Or
Um,
you haven't yet got someone to sort it out for you.
Yeah, yeah. Or often there aren't a lot of people to delegate to if there's only 10 of you
Right.
or something. You know, I mean, sometimes it's purely about resource but what I felt was that I tended to part of the experience was going from one messy problem to another messy problem. And some of those problems there are no easy answers to. I mean, I was talking to
Right.
another CEO about this the other day, and some problems there are no easy solutions.
Right.
There are ways to do things, but there are pros and cons to each one, and somebody inevitably is going to be unhappy about the decision. I mean, what's your take on dealing with that? Do you deal with those with the board, or how does that kind of process work in your situation?
Um, well, I'm giving an example in our world. We are now subject to financial regulators
Right.
that are used to regulating banks,
Yeah. And you're not
and
a bank, are you?
their expectation of the kind of paper and processes and documentation
Yeah.
and separations of control and things like that that they expect on us are ludicrous.
Yeah.
It, and yet we're required to do that. So that's a place that I had to step in and go, okay, how are we going to play this? And this is maybe my weird mindset, but not only how are we going to play this, how are we going to turn this into a competitive advantage? And everybody's like, what?
Okay.
But the answer is most of our competitors are similar sizes. So if we actually learn how to handle this properly and the others don't, they're going to die on the hill that we're going to succeed on.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's ugly work.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of nights in front of this machine late at night reading and writing and, creating policies, which is my worst thing. Our policy book was paper thin before we had to start this process. It's still mostly paper thin, but at least there are some better words down there about
Yeah.
what we do
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
our instincts and the way we operated the business were great. They wanted us to prove it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this piece of paper will not stop anybody, but don't get me started on regulators. But the point is that that's a hard problem that we had to solve with potentially catastrophic process. If we do not get through this audit with the regulator, we will be not permitted to operate our business.
Yeah.
So it's existential.
Yeah. So it's that sort of phrase. I don't know where the quote comes from, but this idea that what cannot be avoided must be welcomed. You're not going to change the
That's a great
regulators,
phrase.
so
Yeah.
you've got to just learn to deal with it, haven't you?
Yeah. So it's kind of that we could be in denial and go, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to deal with that, or embrace it. And maybe that's a different way of saying that, but here's the challenge. Step up as a leader, embrace it, solve it, move on.
Yeah.
What do you learn from that? To my favorite one is don't ever have to do this again
Yeah.
because like I the all all that policy work is boring, is so boring
Yeah.
for me. And I know people love it sometimes that they know how to write those things and they a friend of mine is great at structuring stuff like that. He relishes it.
Yeah.
To me, that's like cutting myself up with razor blades. It's no
Yeah, no, I
thing.
get that. I've got friends that are great at that kind of stuff, and I look at them and think, you live in a different world to me because I
World that
can't
I
think
do.
of anything worse. You know.
And you're very happy, so I can't fault you for it. Like, there's nothing wrong with it at all.
No, no, that's right. I mean, it's a very interesting. I mean, I find it part of that, the psychology I find difficult in the sense that, you hear regulators talking about risk-based
Mhm.
regulation or risk-based audits and what have you, when they're focusing on where the big problems are. And you think, well, focus on HSBC Bank. If that goes under, there is a problem. If we go under, it's not really going to, I mean, it's going to cause a bit of a problem for the people that work it, but it's not really going to wreck the world in the way that some of the banks did. But they try and they don't seem to get that. And I find that very frustrating because you see that. I mean, they're just doing a review here in the UK about looking at regulators and trying to stop regulators getting in the way of growth because the government are desperate to see more growth. So they're saying to them, what can you do to stop getting in the way of companies growing without unleashing lots of problems? So it's a difficult challenge, but it's very frustrating from our side of the fence, from the small businesses side of the fence, to be dealing with
It
all this.
is, but I think it also starts with the consumer level focus that we have to have perfection
Yeah,
in some of these things. So if I put the regulator's hat on for a minute and go, if I have one failure here, where in their case they say one of the companies like this actually supports terrorism, then we are going to get hauled up under parliamentary committees. We're going to be on the
yeah,
front page of the newspaper as we've done our job badly. And so their risk tolerance for a bureaucrat in their career is pretty low
yeah,
because these things are fatal to their career in some cases.
yeah,
So their risk and the risk that they're trying to manage are different.
yeah,
If we could start giving them a little bit of the get out of jail free, it's okay to make a mistake every once in a while, as long as we're making sure that we don't keep making mistakes, then I think the regulators would be much more proactive about helping us do our jobs.
yeah,
We want to make the financial system like we do not want harm to come from what we do in the financial system.
no.
That's bedrock about what we do. But some of the crazy things that get brought up about what we should do to prevent that risk is like so distant from reality. It's
Yeah. It's
unbelievable.
surreal. Some of it is surreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. So, Daryl, thank you for talking us through those issues. Let me just ask you one final question, which is going through my mind. If you were, because you've been on a really interesting journey, you've got a really interesting, I mean, I love the collaborative commerce philosophy. I think that's a really interesting approach. And I can see, because I know you, I can see that it's part of you really, as much as it is part of the business if you were to look back on that journey and you would start, let's say you were starting again, what piece of advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now if you were starting again? I mean, what would that one piece of advice be?
It's funny. When I um in my 20s, I think I felt I'm arrogant enough to feel like I'm fairly intelligent. So I felt that I could use that, and I used it improperly along the way in my mind. And what I would say to myself there is pay way more attention to the people, dude.
Mm.
Like get to know who they are, get to know what helps them win. You won't be as lonely,
Yeah,
which is what it was a really big issue for a long time. CEO job is very, very lonely
yeah,
and so I search out others that have similar circumstances so that we have something to talk with. I was talking with a fellow similar company recently. You could tell he's desperate to have somebody who understands what he's going through. And so we're going to talk regularly because I can help with that. And
yeah,
it's good for me too. But I think, the number one thing I'd say is pay way more attention to the people. And because, I've learned the proverb that comes, an old African problem, apparently, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
yeah, yeah.
And
I've heard
I
that.
think I wish I'd known that sooner.
Yeah. And of course, organizations, I know technology is the rage, But organizations ultimately are built of people, aren't they? I mean, it might be how people use technology, but ultimately they're built around people. And you've got to get the people on board, and you've got to get people pointing in the right direction. What was it they're saying? In good to great, get the right people on the bus, and then work out where you're going to drive the bus to.
Where you're going to drive the bus. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Based on the skill sets that you've collected. And
yeah,
if you go back to the partnership model that you're talking about, managing the 30 partners, that's a lot of just good relationships with people.
yeah,
It's not the logo, it's the people.
yeah,
And that's why the change on the people is so hard on a partnership.
yeah, yeah. Daryl, thank you for sharing that. I mean, lots of interesting stuff there. Lots of very useful insights. So, I mean, I really appreciate you taking a bit of time out to come and have a chat. And as always, good luck going forward. I mean, and I know building a business is terribly hard. It's really hard work. People don't appreciate how hard work it is, and there is always the opportunity for horrible things to go wrong. So, I wish you well going forward. And good luck.
And thank you. And I appreciate that. And I would encourage other people who are thinking about like this type of format, this type of conversation. These are growth conversations for leaders.
Mm,
When we have to kind of think about our approach, when I have to think about my approach and what I'm doing and trying to distill it down into something I can share with somebody, that shining that light on it really helps me. I always learn something about
mm,
business and about me in my conversation with you. And so this is why like I've said, we'll do these anytime you want, because I get a lot out of a conversation like this
yeah.
in terms of self-awareness and kind of reminders about what's important.
Yeah,
So
and
thank you.
likewise, and your final point there about reminding you about what's important because it's really easy to lose track of that,
It
isn't it?
is.
With all the
Especially when
day-to-day
everybody's
stuff.
shooting at you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Daryl, good to see you as always, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, Daryl. Bye bye.